The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds of the Galactic Defense Academy. Kim stood at attention with his fellow human cadets, watching as alien species from across the galaxy demonstrated their natural combat abilities. The sight never failed to amaze him. Even after 6 months at the academy, a massive Vexter cadet named Crystal stepped forward to the weapons range. His reptilian scales gleamed green and black under the artificial lights. With one powerful swing of his arm, he crushed a training dummy made of reinforced steel. The other Vextar cadets cheered, their deep voices echoing across the courtyard. "Impressive," muttered So-Young Park, the human cadet standing next to Taemin. She was small, even by human standards, barely reaching Taemin's shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes studied everything with sharp intelligence. "Not really?" Ji-Ho Lee whispered back. His broad shoulders and muscular frame made him the strongest of the human cadets. But even he looked tiny compared to the Vextar. Anyone can break things. The real skill is in knowing when and how to break them. Hai-Jin Choi nodded in agreement. She was fluent in 7 alien languages and served as the human group's translator during joint exercises. The Vextar always saw problems with force and never think about other options. Dong-Woo Nam, the quiet medic of their group, said nothing. He was too busy taking notes on Vextar anatomy. His medical knowledge had saved several alien cadets during training accidents, earning him some respect among the instructors. The demonstration continued as the insectoid Thralanex cadets took their turn. They moved like lightning, their forearms working in perfect coordination. In seconds, they had disassembled and reassembled a plasma rifle. Their compound eyes tracked multiple targets simultaneously, while their razor-sharp mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "Shhoffs," Ji-Ho muttered, but there was no real anger in his voice. He had learned to respect the abilities of other species, even if they did not respect humans in return. The crystalline Zephyr cadets floated forward next. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could bend and reshape at will. They demonstrated their ability to form energy weapons from their own bodies, creating spears and shields of pure light. The display was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Now for the humans," announced Instructor Velthor, a tall Zephyr with crystal formations that pulsed with blue light. His tone carried the same boredom he might use to discuss cleaning supplies. Taemin stepped forward first. As the unofficial leader of the human cadets, he felt the weight of everyone's expectations. He picked up a standard plasma rifle and aimed at the furthest target. The weapon felt heavy in his hands, designed for species with greater physical strength. He fired. The plasma bolt struck the target, but not in the center. It was a decent shot, but nothing spectacular. A few alien cadets chuckled. So-Young went next, demonstrating her piloting skills on a training simulator. She managed to navigate the course without crashing, but her time was slower than most alien cadets. The Thralanex, with their superior reaction times, had set records that seemed impossible for humans to match. G-Ho showed his strength by lifting weights that would challenge most species, but compared to the Vextar, who could bench press small vehicles, his efforts seemed weak. He finished his demonstration with gritted teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. Hai-Jin displayed her language skills by conducting a conversation in Galactic with perfect grammar and pronunciation. Several alien cadets seemed impressed, but Instructor Velthar merely noted that communication was a support skill, not a combat ability. Finally, Dong-Woo demonstrated his medical knowledge by treating a simulated injury on a volunteer. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. But healing was not considered a warrior skill by most alien cultures. When the humans finished their demonstrations, the training ground fell silent. Then the laughter began. It started with a few Vextar cadets and spread to the other species. Even some of the normally polite Zephyr seemed amused. Is that it? Crystal asked, his voice booming across the courtyard. That is what Earth sends to defend the galaxy. They are so slow, chittered a Thralanex cadet. Ka could defeat all 5 of them before they could react. Their weapon skills are adequate for civilians, added the Zephyr cadet, trying to sound diplomatic. But this is a military academy. Taman felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he kept his expression neutral. His father had been a war hero, killed defending a human colony from pirates. Key had taught Taman that dignity was more important than pride. Patience, So-Young whispered. Let them laugh now. The mockery continued during the afternoon combat simulations. The alien cadets were divided into teams for mock battles, using training weapons that delivered stunning charges instead of lethal force. The humans found themselves picked last for every team, treated as liabilities rather than assets during one simulation. Taman's mixed team was eliminated quickly when their Vextar teammates charged directly into an ambush. The humans had tried to warn them, but the reptilian cadets dismissed human tactical advice as cowardice. You think too much, Crystal told Taman after the simulation ended. War is simple. Find the enemy, kill the enemy. Everything else is weakness. Sometimes thinking prevents unnecessary deaths, Taman replied calmly. Better to die gloriously than live as a coward, Crystal shot back. Earning approving growls from his fellow Vextar, the insults continued during evening meal. The human cadets sat together at the usual table, trying to ignore the comments from nearby tables. The Academy's dining hall served food suitable for all species, but the humans' omnivorous diet was considered primitive by the strictly carnivorous. Vextar and energy-feeding Zephyr. Look at them, sneered a Thralanex cadet. Plants and meat. No wonder they're confused about everything. I heard human soldiers panic and run when faced with real combat, added another alien cadet. Their own history books prove it. Hee-Jin started to respond, but Taman placed a gentle hand on her arm. Save your energy, he said quietly. Words will not change their minds. Then what will? Jiho asked, his frustration obvious. Actions. Dongwu said simply. Prove ourselves through what we do, not what we say. The conversation was interrupted by Instructor Velthar's announcement over the Academy's communication system. His crystal body pulsed with official blue light as he spoke. Attention, all cadets. Tomorrow we begin preparations for your final examination. You will face the Academy's ultimate challenge, the Void Hunters. The dining hall fell silent. Even the most arrogant alien cadets looked worried. The Void Hunters were legendary at the Academy, an AI-controlled enemy system that had defeated countless cadet teams over the years. Void Hunters adapt to any strategy used against them, Velthar continued. They learn from every encounter, becoming stronger and more dangerous. Your final examination will test everything you have learned here. Only the strongest and smartest will survive. As the announcement ended, the human cadets exchanged glances. They had spent months being told they were the weakest students at the Academy. Now they would face the Academy's deadliest challenge. Finally, So-Young said, with a small smile, a real test. Around them, alien cadets began forming alliances and discussing strategy, but no one approached the human table. They would face the Void Hunters alone. Just as they had faced everything else at the Academy, Date-Men looked at his 4 companions. They had endured months of mockery and discrimination. They had been underestimated, dismissed, and ignored, tapped it, and grown stronger. Tomorrow, we begin to show them what humans can do, he said, quietly. The others nodded. The real test was about to begin. The next morning brought chaos to the Academy. Cadets from every species rushed through the corridors, forming teams and making alliances for the final examination. The air buzzed with excitement. and nervous energy as groups of 5 cadets registered. Their teams with the instructors T-men stood in the main hall, watching as alien cadets approached each other with offers of partnership. The Vexter formed their teams quickly, choosing the strongest and most aggressive fighters. The Thralanex selected partners based on speed and coordination. The Zephyr picked teammates who could work together with perfect harmony. No one approached the human cadets. "Looks like we are on our own again," So Young said, joining Tammin by the registration desk. She carried a datapad filled with technical specifications and equipment lists. "Did you expect anything different?" Ko asked as he walked up with Hai-Jin and Dongwu. Hai's tone was bitter, but his eyes showed determination rather than defeat. "Actually, I hoped for this," Hai-Jin admitted. "Working with alien teams has never gone well for us. They ignore our suggestions and blame us when things go wrong." Dongwu nodded in agreement. "At least now we can use our own methods without interference." They registered as Team 5, the last group to sign up. The academy clerk, a bored-looking Zephyr, barely glanced at their names before stamping their papers. Around them, other teams were already discussing strategy and dividing responsibilities. "Team 1 will dominate this exercise," Crystal announced loudly. His Vexter teammates growled in agreement, their scales gleaming with confidence. "We will crush the Void Hunters with superior firepower and strength. Speed will be our advantage," chittered the leader of Team 2, a Thralanex named Siktar. "Hey, we will strike fast and disappear before the enemy can react." Team 3, composed entirely of Zephyr, said nothing. They communicated through light patterns that flashed across their crystal bodies. Their silent coordination was both impressive and unsettling. The human team walked to the equipment distribution center, where each team would receive their gear for the final examination. The quartermaster, a massive Vexter named Groenak, looked at them with obvious disdain. "Humans get standard equipment," he rumbled, pointing to a pile of older gear in the corner. "Advanced weapons are for real warriors." Cayman examined the equipment they had been given. Cayman rifles were older models, less powerful than the newest versions. Their armor was basic protective gear, not the enhanced suits given to other teams. Their communication devices were simple radio units instead of the advanced neural links used by the Zephyr. "This is insulting," Jiho muttered, hefting an old energy weapon. "Half of this stuff belongs in a museum." "Maybe that is exactly what we need," So Young said thoughtfully. She picked up a maintenance kit and began examining the older weapons. Simple technology is often more reliable than complex systems. While other teams spent the afternoon boasting about their equipment, the human team found a quiet corner of the academy to prepare. So Young spread the weapons and gear across several tables, studying each piece with the eye of an engineer. "These rifles are 3 generations old," she explained to the others, "but they are built to last. The newer models have more features, but they also have more parts that can break." She began making modifications using spare parts from the maintenance kit. Her hands moved with practiced skill as she adjusted power settings and replaced worn components. Within hours, she had improved the performance of every weapon. "The armor is basic, but it covers all the vital areas," Dongwu observed, checking the protective gear. "It might not stop a direct hit from a heavy weapon, but it should protect against shrapnel and energy discharge." Hai-Jin tested the communication equipment, adjusting frequencies and checking signal strength. "These radios are old, but they use a simple transmission method. They might actually work better than the advanced systems if there is electronic interference." Jiho practiced with the modified weapons, getting used to their weight and balance. "They feel good," he admitted, "solid and dependable." While the human team worked, other cadets passed by their corner and made comments. Most were not meant to be heard, but the humans heard them anyway. Look at them playing with antique weapons, laughed a Thrallin ex-cadet. Danked, they think they can win with museum pieces. Perhaps they plan to bore the Void Hunters to death, added a Zephyr, earning chuckles from his teammates. I give them 5 minutes before they surrender, Crystal declared. The Void Hunters will eliminate them so quickly it will be embarrassing to watch. The mockery continued into the evening. During dinner, alien cadets began placing bets on which team would win the exercise. The odds heavily favored the Vexter teams, with the Thrallin and Zephyr teams also receiving strong support. What about the humans? Asked a young Vexter cadet who had not learned to hide his curiosity. They are not even worth betting on, Crystal replied. The question is not whether they will lose, but how quickly. I bet they will not last 10 minutes, offered a Thrallin ex-cadet. Too generous, laughed another. 5 minutes, maximum. The human team ate their meal in silence, listening to the predictions of their failure. But instead of feeling discouraged, they felt motivated. Every insult was fuel for their determination. After dinner, Hyjin approached Taemin with a data pad full of information. I have been researching the Void Hunters, she said quietly. The Academy records show some interesting patterns. She showed him the data she had collected. Look at this. Every team that has faced the Void Hunters has used the same basic strategy. Okay, they locate the enemy, engage with maximum firepower, and try to overwhelm them quickly. That makes sense, Taemin replied. Hit them hard and fast before they can adapt. Look at the results, Hyjin continued. The teams that achieve early success often fail later in the exercise. The Void Hunters seem to become stronger as the battle continues. Dongwoo joined their conversation, bringing his own research. I found something interesting in the medical files. Several cadets who survived encounters with the Void Hunters reported that the enemy seemed to learn from each engagement, imitated their tactics, and became harder to defeat. That confirms what the instructors told us, So-young said, looking up from her equipment modifications. The Void Hunters learn from every encounter. But what exactly do they learn? According to the reports, they learn tactical patterns, weapon signatures, and movement styles, Hyjin explained. They build a profile of their opponents and develop countermeasures. So the conventional approach might actually make them stronger, Taemin realized. Every successful attack teaches them how to defend against similar attacks, which means we need to do something different, Jiho said, understanding the implications. We need to fight in a way that does not help them learn. The team spent the rest of the evening developing their strategy, while other teams planned elaborate assaults and coordinated attacks. The humans focused on unpredictability and adaptation. We cannot match the other teams in raw power or speed, Taemin explained, but we can be more flexible, can change our tactics constantly, never giving the Void Hunters a chance to fully adapt. I can modify our equipment to be even more unpredictable, So-young added. Simple weapons that can be quickly reconfigured for different purposes. And I can monitor enemy adaptation patterns, Hyjin said. If I can figure out how they learn, maybe I can find ways to confuse their learning process. As the night grew late, the human team finalized their preparations. Tomorrow, they would face the Academy's deadliest challenge with outdated equipment and no allies. The other teams expected them to fail quickly and quietly, but the humans had something the other teams lacked, the willingness to think differently. They had been outsiders from the beginning, forced to find their own solutions to every problem. Now, that experience might be their greatest advantage. Get some rest, Taemin told his teammates. Tomorrow, we show everyone what humans can do when they stop underestimating us. The others nodded and headed to their quarters. Tomorrow would bring their greatest test, but they were ready to face it together. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were far more dangerous than anyone realized. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Kethmer, a barren world chosen for the final examination. Through the viewport, Taman could see a landscape of jagged rocks, poisonous gas vents, and electrical storms that painted the sky in violent colors. This was where they would face the Void Hunters. 20 teams of cadets sat in the transport's cargo bay, each group keeping to themselves. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Some alien cadets checked their weapons for the 100th time. Others meditated or performed ritual preparations. The human team sat quietly, reviewing their plan one final time. "Remember," Taman whispered to his teammates, "we are not trying to win quickly. We are trying to win smart." Instructor Velthor's voice echoed through the transport's communication system. "Attention, cadets. You will be dropped in different zones across the planet. Your mission is to survive for 72 hours while eliminating as many Void Hunters as possible. The enemy will become stronger and more dangerous as time passes. Only the most skilled will complete this test." The first drop zone appeared. Below them, Team 1, led by Crystal, prepared for deployment. The Vexter cadets roared their battle cries as they checked their heavy weapons one last time. "We will show these machines what real warriors can do," Crystal declared, his voice carrying across the cargo bay. "Victory through strength." But transport doors opened, and Team 1 jumped into the storm-filled sky, their parachutes deployed perfectly, carrying them toward the rocky terrain below. The watching cadets could see them landing in formation, already moving toward their objective with military precision. More teams followed. The Thralanics of Team 2 moved like lightning as they prepared for their drop. Their forearms worked in perfect coordination, checking equipment and adjusting their gear. They disappeared into the storm without a sound. Team 3, the Zephyri, needed no parachutes. They simply floated out of the transport, their crystal bodies glowing as they descended like falling stars. Their silent coordination was both beautiful and intimidating. Finally, it was the human team's turn. They stood at the edge of the transport, looking down at the hostile world below. The wind howled around them, carrying the smell of sulfur and ozone. "Are you ready?" Taman asked his teammates. "As ready as we can be," So-Young replied, adjusting her modified equipment one last time. They jumped together, their parachutes opening in perfect sequence. The storm winds buffeted them as they descended, but they managed to land within 50 meters of each other. The ground was hard and unforgiving, covered with sharp rocks and steaming cracks. "Communication check," Nijin said into her radio. "Team 5, all members present," came the replies from the others. They gathered their equipment and began moving toward higher ground. The modified weapons that So-Young had worked on felt solid and reliable in their hands. The older armor was lighter than expected, allowing them to move more freely than teams with heavier gear. The Academy's monitoring system came alive as the exercise began. In the command center, instructors watched multiple screens showing the progress of each team. The early reports were exactly what everyone expected. Team 1 had made contact with the Void Hunters within minutes of landing. Crystal's voice boomed across the communication channels as his team engaged the enemy with overwhelming firepower. "Targets destroyed," he reported. "The machines are no match for Vexter's strength." Team 2 followed quickly, their high-speed attacks catching the Void Hunters off guard. The Thralanics moved so fast that the enemy barely had time to react before being eliminated. 15 targets eliminated, Siktar reported. "The machines are too slow to challenge us." Team 3 worked with their usual silent efficiency. The Zephyri coordinated their attacks with perfect timing, their energy weapons cutting through Void Hunter defenses like they were made of paper. The alien cadets watching from the transport cheered as the early reports came in. It seemed like the exercise would be over quickly, with the superior alien teams achieving easy victory. "Where are the humans?" asked one of the watching cadets. "Probably hiding," laughed another. They know they cannot compete with real warriors, but the human team was not hiding. They were studying, while other teams rushed to engage the enemy. Cayman's group had found a shelter position with good visibility of the surrounding area. They watched as Void Hunters moved through the landscape, noting their behavior patterns and response times. "Look at how they move," Dongwu observed through his binoculars. "They are not just machines, they are learning machines." "I can see the adaptation process," Hyjin added, monitoring enemy communications. Every time they encounter a new attack, they broadcast the information to other units. They are building a database of countermeasures. Soyoung was making final adjustments to their equipment. Kezia, her modifications had turned simple weapons into versatile tools that could be quickly reconfigured for different purposes. A plasma rifle could become a mining tool, a cutting torch, or even a signal beacon. The other teams are making the enemy stronger, she realized. Every successful attack teaches the Void Hunters how to defend against similar attacks. As if to prove her point, the communication channels began to change. The confident reports from other teams became more cautious. The Void Hunters were starting to fight back more effectively. "They are adapting to our tactics," Crystal reported, his voice less certain than before. "The machines are using new defensive patterns." "Confirmed," came Siktar's voice. "Enemy reaction time is improving. They are predicting our movements." The human team continued to observe and learn. They identified weak points in Void Hunter armor, studied their movement patterns, and noted how they communicated with each other. But they did not attack. "Not yet." "Command to Team 5, came Instructor Velthor's voice over the radio. "Report your status, okay? Other teams are engaging the enemy successfully. Team 5 is conducting reconnaissance," Taman replied calmly. "We are gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities." "That is a fancy way of saying they are too scared to fight," muttered one of the watching cadets. The mockery continued as the human team maintained their position. Other teams were reporting impressive numbers of eliminated Void Hunters, while the humans had not engaged a single enemy unit. To outside observers, it looked like cowardice, but the situation was starting to change. The Void Hunters were no longer easy targets. They had learned from each encounter, developing new tactics and defenses. The alien teams found themselves facing increasingly difficult challenges. Enemy is using coordinated attacks, reported. Team 4, a mixed group of aliens. They are working together in ways we have not seen before. Confirmed, came another voice. The machines are setting traps. They are predicting our assault patterns. The human team watched as the Void Hunters began to turn the tables on their attackers. The enemy units that had been easily destroyed at the beginning of the exercise were now fighting with deadly efficiency. They had learned from every mistake, adapted to every tactic, and evolved into something far more dangerous. "Now I understand," Taman said quietly. "This is not just a test of combat skills. It is a test of adaptation. The teams that rely on fixed tactics will eventually fail. The Void Hunters are becoming stronger every minute," Hyjin observed. "They are learning faster than the other teams can adapt, which means we need to do something completely different," Jiho said, understanding the implications. "We need to fight in a way that does not help them learn." The first distress call came from Team 7, a group of mixed aliens who had been overconfident about their chances. Their leader's voice was strained as he reported their situation. "We are surrounded. Enemy has learned our tactics, requesting immediate extraction." The communication channel went silent. Team 7 had been eliminated. Finally, Soyoung said, checking her modified equipment one last time. "Now we can begin." The human team moved out from their observation position, but they did not head toward the areas where other teams were fighting. Instead, they chose a different path. Avoiding the main battle zones where the Void Hunters had learned the most, they were not running away. They were positioning themselves for a completely different kind of warfare. While other teams had been teaching the enemy how to fight, the humans had been learning how to think. The real test was about to begin. In this time, the humans would not be underestimated for long. The communication channels erupted with panic as Team 12 sent their final distress call. Static filled the air before the signal cut off completely, leaving only silence where confident alien voices had been reporting victories just hours before. In the Academy's command center, Instructor Velthar watched the monitoring screens with growing concern. Red markers showed eliminated teams scattered across the planet's surface. What had started as a routine exercise was becoming a disaster. Team 6 is under heavy attack, came a strained voice over the radio. It was the leader of a unit, his usual confidence replaced by fear. The machines are using our own tactics against us. They know exactly how we move. Possible, muttered Instructor Gronick, the massive Vexter who served as the Academy's combat trainer. No way I should be able to adapt this quickly. But the evidence was clear on every screen. The Void Hunters had evolved from simple targets into sophisticated predators. They moved with deadly purpose, setting traps and ambushes that perfectly countered each team's preferred fighting style. Team 1's confident advance had turned into a desperate retreat. Crystal's voice came over the radio, barely controlled rage mixing with something that sounded like fear. The machines know our assault patterns, he reported through gritted teeth. Every time we attack, they are ready for us. They have learned to target our weak points. The Vexter had always relied on overwhelming strength and direct assault, but the Void Hunters had analyzed their tactics and developed perfect counters. Heavy armor that once seemed impenetrable was now being pierced by precise strikes. Powerful weapons that could destroy buildings were being neutralized by coordinated defensive actions. Team to face an even worse situation. The Thralanic speed that had been their greatest advantage was now working against them. The Void Hunters had learned to predict their lightning-fast movements, setting traps in the exact spots where the insectoid cadets would dodge. They are faster than us now, Ziktar reported, his voice filled with disbelief. The machines move like they know where we will be before we know it ourselves. Team 3, the Silent Zephyr, found their perfect coordination turned into a liability. The Void Hunters had learned to jam their light-based communication, breaking apart their flawless teamwork. Without their ability to coordinate, the crystalline cadets were fighting as individuals against an enemy that worked as a unified force. One by one, the elite teams that had mocked the humans were being systematically destroyed. The betting pools that had heavily favored alien victory were becoming records of failure. The cadets watching from orbit could barely believe what they were seeing. How is this possible? Asked a young Vextar cadet. Our teams had the best weapons, the strongest fighters, the fastest reflexes. The Void Hunters learned from every victory, Instructor Velthar explained, his crystal body pulsing with worried orange light. Each successful attack taught them how to defend against similar attacks. The teams that achieved early success made the enemy stronger. What about the humans? Asked another cadet. The instructors checked their screens, looking for Team 5's position. For hours, the human team had appeared to be doing nothing. They had not engaged any Void Hunters. They had not reported any victories. Teamed be wandering aimlessly through the wilderness. They are probably lost, Gronok rumbled. Humans have no sense of direction in combat. But the human team was not lost. They were exactly where they wanted to be, moving through areas where the Void Hunters had learned the least. While other teams had been teaching the enemy advanced combat techniques, the humans had been studying the enemy's learning process itself. The adaptation algorithm has 3 phases, Hyjin explained to her teammates as they crouched behind a rock formation. First, they observe and record new tactics. Second, they analyze the data and develop countermeasures. Third, They shared the information with all other units. So, if we can disrupt any of those phases, we can fight them effectively, Taemin realized. It's better than that, So Young said, her modified equipment ready for action. If we can feed them false information, we can make them adapt in the wrong direction. They had found a group of 3 Void Hunters patrolling an area where no other team had fought. These units had learned the least, making them the perfect targets for the human team's unconventional approach. Remember, Dongwu said as he checked his medical supplies, we are not trying to destroy them quickly. We are trying to confuse them. The attack began, unlike any the Void Hunters had experienced. Instead of direct assault or coordinated strikes, the humans used chaos as their weapon. So Young's modified rifle fired plasma bolts that changed frequency mid-flight. Ji-ho threw rocks with the same precision he used for grenades, making the enemy waste defensive energy on harmless projectiles. The Void Hunters tried to adapt. There was nothing consistent to learn from. So every human attack was different. From the last, every tactic was abandoned as soon as the enemy began to counter it. The machines found themselves adapting to patterns that no longer existed. Target neutralized, Taemin reported as the first Void Hunter collapsed, its circuits overloaded by contradictory adaptation commands. How did they do that? Asked an instructor, watching the impossible scene on his monitor. The human success continued as they moved to engage more Void Hunters. But instead of using the same tactics, they changed everything. Weapons became tools, tools became weapons, and nothing followed the patterns the enemy expected. Hai-Jin used her language skills to broadcast false tactical information on frequencies the Void Hunters monitored. The enemy units began adapting to threats that did not exist, wasting processing power on useless countermeasures. Dongwu's medical knowledge proved crucial when he realized the Void Hunters' weakness. Their adaptation process required constant data analysis, which generated heat that had to be managed. By forcing rapid adaptations to constantly changing tactics, the humans were making the enemy overheat their own systems. Another target down, Ji-ho reported as a Void Hunter collapsed from system overload. The communication channels filled with disbelief as word of the human success spread. Teams that had been on the verge of elimination began requesting support, but the humans were too busy with their own mission to help others. This is impossible. Crixtala's voice came over the radio. How are the humans succeeding where we failed, right? They are not fighting the enemy, realized one of the watching instructors. Okay? They are fighting the enemy's ability to fight. As the hours passed, the human team eliminated Void Hunter after Void Hunter using methods no alien mind could have conceived. They turned the enemy's greatest strength into its greatest weakness, using adaptation against the adapters. The Academy's monitoring room fell silent as the impossible became reality. The team everyone had expected to fail first was becoming the most successful group on the planet. The tide of battle had turned, and humanity was just getting started. The final phase of the examination began when the Void Hunters made their ultimate adaptation. Deep within their central processing core, the artificial intelligence gathered every piece of tactical data from the eliminated teams. It combined Vixter, strength with Rolinek speed, and Zephyr coordination. It's creating the perfect counter to every conventional military strategy. The result was terrifying. Void Hunters across the planet began moving with deadly purpose, their metal bodies gleaming as they hunted the remaining cadets with ruthless efficiency. These were no longer simple training machines. They had become the ultimate predator, designed to defeat any enemy they faced. Team 15 fell first, their mixed alien composition proving useless against an enemy that knew every species' weaknesses. Team 3, the proud Zephyr, who had seemed untouchable, were eliminated when the Void Hunters used their own coordination tactics against them, decayed one by one. The remaining teams sent desperate final messages before their communications went silent. In the command center, panic filled the air. Instructors who had run this exercise dozens of times watched in horror as their supposedly routine test became a massacre. The Void Hunters had evolved beyond their programming, becoming something more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. "We should abort the exercise," suggested Instructor Velthor, his crystal body pulsing with worried colors. "Okay. The remaining teams cannot survive against this level of adaptation." "Agreed," rumbled Gronok. The machines had become too dangerous. This was not the intended outcome. But before they could send the abort signal, something impossible happened. Team 5, the human cadets, everyone had written off as failures, made contact with the ultimate Void Hunter formation. The engagement should have lasted seconds. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had learned from every previous encounter. Logic dictated that they would be eliminated immediately. Instead, the impossible began to unfold. Timon led his team in a dance of chaos that defied every military doctrine ever written. They take from impossible angles, retreated when they should have advanced, and used their weapons in ways that violated every tactical manual. When the Void Hunters adapted to their plasma rifle attacks, the humans started using the weapons as clubs. When the enemy learned to counter their movement patterns, they began moving randomly, like they had no plan at all. "What are they doing?" asked a watching instructor, staring at the monitor in confusion. "They're refusing to follow any pattern," Hygen explained over the radio as she continued her chaotic assault. "The enemy cannot adapt to tactics that do not exist." Saw Young had pushed her equipment modifications to their absolute limit. Her weapons changed function every few seconds, shifting from energy beams to kinetic projectiles to electromagnetic pulses. The Void Hunters tried desperately to adapt, but by the time they developed a counter, the weapon had already changed into something completely different. Jiho fought like a madman, throwing rocks one moment and firing precise shots the next. He used broken Void Hunter parts as weapons, turning the enemy's own technology against him. When his rifle ran out of power, he grabbed a piece of metal debris and used it as a spear. "The enemy is overloading," Dong Wu reported as he watched a Void Hunter collapse from system failure. "Their adaptation processes cannot handle this level of chaos." The ultimate Void Hunter formation, designed to be unbeatable, found itself facing an enemy it could not understand. Every time it adapted to one human tactic, the humans abandoned that tactic and tried something completely different. The machines' greatest strength became their greatest weakness as they burned through processing power trying to counter attacks that no longer existed. But the humans were not just creating chaos. They were creating directed chaos, carefully designed to overload the enemy's adaptation systems. Kamen coordinated the madness with the skill of a master conductor, ensuring that every random action served their ultimate purpose. "Target the processing nodes," he called out as he spotted the Void Hunter command unit. "Force it to make rapid adaptations." The team focused their chaotic assault on the central Void Hunter, bombarding it with contradictory tactical information. The machine's circuits sparked as it tried desperately to process attacks that made no logical sense. Plasma bolts that curved in impossible directions. Grenades that exploded into harmless confetti. Weapons that fired backwards. The adaptation algorithm, faced with data that violated every rule of combat, began to collapse under its own complexity. The Void Hunter's metal frame shuddered as internal systems overheated from the effort of processing impossible information. "System failure detected," the machine announced in its mechanical voice, able to adapt to unknown tactical paradigm. Then it fell silent. One by one, the other Void Hunters connected to the network suffered the same fate. The adaptation data that should have made them stronger instead crashed their systems. The perfect predator had been defeated by imperfect prey. All enemy units neutralized, Taman reported, his voice calm despite the impossible victory they had just achieved. The communication channels fell completely silent. For long moments, no one spoke. Instructors stared at their monitors in disbelief. Alien cadets, watching from orbit, could not process what they had just witnessed. The humans had not just survived the final examination. They had won it completely. How is this possible? Crystal finally asked, his voice hollow with shock. The proud Vexter warrior who had mocked human weakness now sounded lost and confused. They fought like there was no plan, Ziktor added, his chittering voice filled with, but it was the perfect plan. The truth slowly dawned on everyone watching. The human cadets had done something no alien mind could have conceived. Oh, they had turned war into art, combat into creativity, and order into beautiful chaos. 3 days later, the academy held its graduation ceremony. The grand hall was packed with cadets from every species. But for the first time in the academy's history, the hall was completely silent as the human team took the stage. Instructor Valter stepped forward to present the honors. His crystal body pulsed with colors of respect and admiration as he spoke. Team 5 has achieved something unprecedented in the history of this academy. They have shown us that true strength comes not from following the rules, but from understanding when to break them. The 5 Korean humans stood at attention as they received the highest honors the academy could bestow. But more than the medals and ribbons, they had earned something far more valuable, the respect of every alien who had once mocked them. Crixtel was the first to approach them after the ceremony. The massive Vexter, who had once called them weak, now looked at them with something approaching awe. I do not understand how you did it, he admitted quietly. But I know now that I was wrong about humans. We are all wrong sometimes, Taman replied simply. The important thing is learning from our mistakes. As the ceremony ended and the cadets prepared to take their first assignments as officers in the Galactic Alliance fleet, word of the human victory spread throughout the galaxy. The species that had been dismissed as primitive and weak had proven that they possess something more valuable than strength or speed, the ability to think in ways no one else could imagine. The laughter had stopped. The mockery was over. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other enemies of the Galactic Alliance began to worry about what humans might be capable of when the stakes were real.